Historically, potash hasn't been given much priority in the Great Plains, mainly because we have natively high soil potassium levels. But with the shift to more corn and soybeans, we're now starting to see soil test levels decline, and it's a decline that, if not properly addressed, growers could start losing out on thousands in yields, and for some growers, it's already happening. And you can't blame growers for not thinking about potassium, because for decades, say 40 years ago, many growers had soil test potassium levels that were 400, 500, 600 parts per million in cases.
Potassium has always been one of those nutrients that we thought would always remain high, so it kind of fell off the radar.
You could think of potassium as say a bank account, that we started out with a really high balance and we've been drawing on it for a very long time.
And so now, after years of withdrawals, we're starting to reach a point where growers might be near that critical level where we could see some yield declines.
The expansion of corn and soybeans, especially soybeans, into the Great Plains is a huge reason why we see the potassium levels decline.
At the same time, yields have doubled, if not tripled, so crop removal is double or tripled.
The Great Plains has essentially become Iowa. You drive for miles and all you see is corn and soybeans, and that 20 years ago you didn't see that at all.
And this is a serious change in American agriculture. To give some context, let's look at a recent 10-year chunk of data from 2005 to 2015. Using 4 Great Plains states as an example, you can see just how much the corn and soybean acreage has increased in 10 years. In North Dakota alone, corn acreage increased by 1.34 million and soybean increased by 2.8 million acres. When you look at these numbers, it's not surprising that we also see a significant number of soil samples that are testing below the critical level. In North Dakota alone, we see 3% more samples are testing below the critical level. In South Dakota, it's 4%, in Nebraska, 3%, and in Kansas, 6% more samples are testing below the critical level in that 10-year span.
You get a number of growers that just said, hey, I know what my levels were 5, 10 years ago. They couldn't have changed too much.
For growers who historically believe that our soil test potassium levels are still really high, they might be surprised if they soil test again. This map shows the K2O removal across the Great Plains, and you can see in the areas that are red and orange, these are areas where we are removing a lot more potassium than guys are putting on. This map shows the result of that removal. You can see in the Great Plains, that's probably 50 to 100 pounds of K2O being removed every year without being replaced. In our lab, we've seen similar trends. Each year we receive hundreds of thousands of soil samples from the northern Great Plains and the Canadian prairies. You can actually see the median soil test K numbers across these areas decline. In eastern North Dakota, since 2001, we've seen an annual decline in soil test potassium levels by about 1.1 part per million. In eastern South Dakota, that decline has been 2.8 parts per million per year. So if you look at that as a decade, that's a significant decline. I often get calls from agronomists and growers asking for some explanation on their soil test results. And more often, I seem to be saying the letter K. And we're going to have to start replacing it in order to keep up with yields and to keep improving yields.
So that'll be a game changer to those farmers. And now all of a sudden, just like some of our farmers, they have to start worrying about it.
The big takeaway is that you can't think of potassium as an afterthought anymore.
It's economics, it's soil fertility, so it's one of those things that we can't go without.
So if you are low, applying potassium is really the key to being as productive and as profitable as possible.